It began in 1982. A serious economic turmoil was plaguing Nigeria. Oil prices had fallen from an average of $34 in 1981 to $32 in 1982. But they didn't stop there. By the time 1983 came around, the price of crude oil was $29 per barrel. Desperate to keep the government running and the people happy, President Shehu Shagari decided to do what every Nigerian politician going into an election year would do: lie to the people. He told Nigerians that everything was going to be fine. Shagari's government would dig deep into Nigeria's foreign reserves, which stood at $10 billion as at 1980. By 1983, the country had barely $1 billion left in its foreign reserves. The oil revenue, which the government had depended heavily on, kept drying up. The solution to this mess? Yeah, you guessed right: borrow. You see, before the oil boom of 1973, Nigeria had total foreign debt of $420 million. By 1982, however, that figure had ballooned to $14.7 billion. Oil revenue dropped from $22.4 billion in 1980 to $9.6 billion in 1982. Yet, Nigerian politicians kept telling the public that the country was rich and had oil wealth. As an oil-rich country then, the Nigerian government decided to keep the naira on par with the dollar. That was when we had 1 naira equal to $1. In reality, the naira was much worse. To give you an understanding of how bad things were, many companies struggled to access forex for raw materials and spare parts. Unable to continue business in such a difficult economic climate, they started folding up and sacking workers. Civil servants were being owed salaries, some for 3 to 4 months, because the government was just too broke to pay up. The forex shortage in the country got so bad that Nigeria could no longer afford to import basic food items like rice, sugar, and milk. Well, after very important deliberation with his economic wizards, President Shehu Shagari decided to introduce something called the import licensing. This meant only a closed group of importers with already issued permits would be allocated the little dollars left in the country. A presidential task force was then set up to import rice to sell at fixed prices. But as is typical with the corruption in Nigeria, many of those who got forex using their connections with the Shagari's government were not even importers or manufacturers. So what did they do with the dollars they got? Some of them diverted it to the streets, and in so doing, the dollar black market was born. Now, in full panic mode, the Shagari's government tried so many ways to keep the country stable and avoid a total collapse. He introduced something called an emergency stabilization plan that intended to cut spending, reduce imports, and increase duties. Yeah, it didn't work. It was all trial and error at this point. And nothing seemed to click for Shagari. Prices of goods and services went through the roof. People lost their jobs as companies tried to stay afloat. Chaos was beginning to take hold. It was at the height of this economic turmoil that this man appeared on screens on the 31st of December 1983.
Fellow countrymen and women, I, Brigadier Sani Abacha of the Nigerian Army, address you this morning.
That was General Sani Abacha announcing the coup that brought Buhari into power. You see, when General Buhari took over from Shagari, he must have believed he did the absolute best thing for the people. He must have felt like a genius when he ordered price controls for essential commodities, when he unleashed soldiers on poor traders, instructing them to invade warehouses, shops, and markets, and to dictate the prices at which goods should be sold. The problem, though, was these soldiers knew nothing about economics. They forced old market women to sell sugar, Omo detergent, milk, and other essential goods below the prices at which they got them. Selling less than the cost price meant those traders were going out of business. Despite the cries of those poor marketers, the soldiers didn't back down. And The foolish economic policy of flogging people to sell below the cost price didn't make goods cheaper either. In fact, things got worse as traders began to hoard their goods to avoid being forced to sell at a loss. But why am I telling you the story of something that happened in the 80s? We have grown and must have learned from our past mistakes, right? Well, have we? Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima announced recently the establishment of a board charged with controlling and regulating food prices. I guess age-old problems require age-old solutions. That didn't work. In this video, I'm going to show you why the Nigerian economy is collapsing very fast and how that may affect you, the average Nigerian. It was May 2022 and Musa had just got the news that the price of rice had gone up. 50 kg was now selling for 23,000 naira in Abuja. He would have to buy 100 kg so as to avoid any surprises, especially as prices of goods kept fluctuating. So he sent someone to Sokoto, where he got 100 kg bag of rice for 44,000 naira. Yeah, he was a happy man. His family would feed on this for months to come. 12 months later, however, Nigeria got renewed hope and things were about to get crazy.
A bag of rice, if you go to us, we're buying it now 65,000 naira.
That was me in the market just a few weeks ago. But while making my research for this video, I came across a shocking discovery. Things have changed yet again. It is now March 2024 and the price of a 50 kg bag of rice is now between 85,000 naira to 90,000 naira. Now, depending on when you are seeing this video, it would have maybe gone up yet again. Overall, prices of goods have gone up by more than 30%, the highest figure in nearly 30 years. The cost of food has risen by close to 100% in the last couple of months. However, the monthly minimum wage remains 30,000 naira, which is worth just $19 at current exchange rates. Over 80 million families are living on less than 400 naira per day. So the question is, how do they afford food? I saw a recent report that in the north, some people are now eating the rice that is normally discarded as part of the milling process. And it is not only food prices going up now. In 2022, Nigeria's public debt stood at 46.25 trillion naira. By February 2024, that figure had ballooned to 107.38 trillion naira. When I saw this, my first question was, if we've been borrowing such large sums of money, why is the economy doing worse each year? Forgive me, I'm a novice in economics, but I thought we were investing the loans. It's like a businessman investing more and more money into his trade, but keeps coming out with more losses, each worse than the previous year. This was when I realized that if you take a closer look, the Nigerian economic collapse is not a myth. Everything is clear to see. Now, here's what I mean. The economic record of Buhari during his military days suggested that he shouldn't ever manage even the tiniest of poultry farms, not to talk of a giant economy like Nigeria. Unleashing soldiers to enforce an ill-thought price control that led to traders hoarding their goods to avoid selling below cost price was not the worst of Buhari's economic policies of the 80s. According to The Economist in 1983, the Nigerian government under Buhari rationed forex assigned for importation to just $380 million a month. Buhari's policies in the 80s included trade restrictions with the central bank's refusal to grant foreign exchange for the import of certain goods. His government basically fixed the value of the naira as against leaving it to market forces. Buhari was also strongly in opposition to the removal of the fuel subsidy we're hearing about today, something he would later call a fraud. Guess what? All of these failed policies that led to his removal from office in yet another palace coup in 1985 were still repeated when he was elected into office in 2015. Yeah, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, they say. This time though, he made sure he wrecked the economy to levels beyond repairs. According to findings, the previous government of Buhari had asked the country's central bank, led by this guy, Emefiele, for loans to cover spending under something referred to as ways and means. You know what the bank did? Emefiele, in his infinite wisdom, decided to turn the central bank into a printing press for the Buhari-led government, printing 22.7 trillion naira. That was the equivalent of $49 billion. The result? The record level inflation we're seeing today. This catastrophic decision-making isn't criminalized in Nigeria. All the politicians involved in that gutter behavior of printing endless cash into the economy are still walking free without any sort of accountability. Rather, they are hailed as national heroes. And then the new administration came in without a plan on what to do about the collapsing naira. Nigeria's currency, the naira, has crashed to 1,524 naira to $1 in recent surveys, reflecting a 230% loss of value in the last year alone. This was after the magic economic touch of the savior of Lagos State, President Bela, the man that tamed the Atlantic Ocean. Mr. Tinubu had ended the policy of pegging the price of the naira to the US dollar, rather than leaving it up to the market to determine on the basis of supply and demand. But this hasn't helped the decline, as the naira is now more worthless than ever before. As with his predecessor though, President Tinubu has chosen to go to war with young Nigerians, as obviously they are the ones making the naira to keep falling. Yeah, they do this through crypto trading on the cryptocurrency exchange platform known as Binance. So the clear solution was to make sure Binance stopped operating in Nigeria. The logic behind this reasoning still beats my imagination. But I guess that doesn't matter because Nigeria's economy defeats all logic. After all, no be statistics we go chop. The reality of the situation, however, works with statistics, as is shown by the number of companies leaving the country in droves. Some are announcing ridiculous losses, like MTN, that posted a 137 billion naira loss as a result of the naira's decline. But away from the statistics side of things, we have law enforcement in collusion with a billionaire oppressing a young woman over her review of a product she bought with her own money. Yeah, in countries where humans run their affairs as opposed to heartless animals, they call this absence of the rule of law. Like, where in the entire world is it a crime to review a product you bought? You see, when there's a lack of rule of law in a country, people lose confidence in the government's ability to protect them. By people, I meant investors and consumers alike. How about the poor infrastructure? There are no proper rail lines connecting major cities and ports. The roads are basically death traps. If you survive accidents, you will be scared of kidnappers taking advantage of bad routes to mount roadblocks and ambush you. Insecurity in the country is at record levels. These bandits, terrorists, or whatever they are being called now, have succeeded in sacking many communities that farmers can no longer go to their farms, leading to crazy levels of hunger in the land. And for those still struggling to keep their lights on and work their asses off to put food on the table, they are having to deal with severe power outages that occur every 20 minutes or so, depending on where you're residing. When you add the lack of will of the Nigerian leaders to fix these terrible living conditions of the people, you begin to understand why the country is gradually collapsing. I recently came across a question by an analyst. He wanted to know whether Nigeria's current predicament is the fault of the leaders or the average citizen. While I wouldn't want to point at any particular person, the truth is the Nigerian crisis is fueled by the greed of the average Nigerian. While there are genuine people amongst us calling for a better government for the good of all, there are some who will go to any length to secure their own daily meal, even if it means at the expense of the masses. There are people amongst us who wouldn't mind the country burning to the ground as long as they are being paid to set the fire. There are folks who believe that as long as it pays, it's worth it. And so they will say anything, sell anything, push any narrative just to get their own share of the loot. This was how we became captives of these terrible humans leading us today. Nigerian politicians are corrupt just for the sake of it. Some of them don't even need the money, like their entire generation is made for life, yet they want more. You see, greed can be a terrible thing, and if we are not careful as a nation, it will be the end of our union. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.